Welcome in, ladies and gentlemen, to another edition of the Nick and Cody podcast. I'm Nick McDonald. That is Cody Barwick. Buddy, how was your weekend?
It was a good weekend, man. Like I said before we hit that record button, it was a very typical Cody weekend. Watched golf, and then when I got tired of watching, I went to the driving range or something like that. So it was a good weekend in my books. Helped one of my friends unload a new dresser, stuff like that. Basic, didn't do too much fun stuff. You, on the other hand, had just spent a little while up in Michigan. Let's hear about your vacation you just took.
Oh, just a lot of laying on the beach, a lot of eating bad food, a lot of good weather. Not too much to report, but very good time. And I highly recommend Southern Michigan if anybody can ever make their way up there. It's a great vacation spot. So, with that in mind, we can roll into the news and notes here real quick.
Absolutely. I'm gonna plug in a little. Like, comment, subscribe. If you've made it to the first 2 minutes of the video, appreciate it. Stick around for the rest. Make sure to throw that like, that subscribe on there, and then just throw a quick comment, even if it's not much that you have to say about the video. Any kind of interaction will help us kind of get our names out there more. So appreciate you taking a listen. Give us a like, hit that subscribe, leave a comment, share it. If you have other friends interested in fantasy, we'd greatly appreciate it. But Nick, how about you go ahead and take it away with the retirement of Rob Gronkowski?
Yeah, a little surprising news here towards the end of the week last week, right after we recorded our initial pod on Tuesday night. We saw that Gronk ended up retiring for the second time. Odds are, I would say, is that this isn't the last we've seen of him in the NFL. But for now, I think he's probably off draft boards and maybe a slight impact to Brady, but other than not taking Gronk himself in the 11th or 12th round of drafts right now, I don't see a ton of impact. I mean, maybe a slight lean towards Mike Evans now and Brate becoming a tight end streamer. But other than that, I think, Gronkowski kind of operated in his own realm of this offense. So I don't see too much fantasy impact here, like I said, other than just staying away from Gronk in redraft leagues right now.
Yeah, I mean, I will say Gronk was a safety blanket for Brady, but he's not going to take Brady, down my draft board at all by him retiring. They still have plenty of weapons in Tampa Bay, so not worried from a perspective. When it comes, I feel like it may help Chris Godwin when he comes back a little bit. Some of those, quick throws, stuff like that, he kind of make to Gronkowski, or some of those like later in the progression throws whenever he just kind of knows where Gronk's going to be. I feel like Chris Godwin plays a similar part of the field as Gronk, where Mike Evans may be 50 yards downfield and Brady has no chance of getting it to him. So I could see Godwin having a little bit of a bump here once he's back from injury. Cameron Brate. So I'll just dive into this. Our buddy Justin and I, we co-manage a dynasty team. We had Gronk as our tight end. We do have Brate as a backup as well as another Saints tight end. It's kind of a no name. But at this point in the season, I mean, unless, there's someone on the waiver wire that gets dropped or something, I just plan on rolling with Brate as a streamable tight end. Obviously in dynasty, it's a little different because I can't just go pick up, Tyler Higbee or someone like that off the waiver wire. In redrafts, I don't think I'm going to draft Brate, and I wouldn't draft Gronkowski. He would be someone that you'd be willing to spend a lot of fab on if you're weak at the tight end and he comes back.
Sure.
But that's kind of just my quick thoughts on that. I don't think that we've seen the last of him either. I feel like he will come back at some point this year, especially if they're good.
Yeah, deeper dynasty league, I would say don't drop Gronk quite yet. But yeah, redraft, go ahead and stay away. You'll be able to pick him up in the season if the rumor mill starts to swirl that he's coming back. And like you said, maybe a slight bump to Godwin and Evans. Evans gaining a little bit more red zone responsibility, and Godwin maybe operating over the middle of the field. Has a slight bump to his target share, but I mean, Brady spreads the ball around. I think he'll continue to do that. So I don't see their target shares jumping to a degree where we're moving them significantly in our rankings or anything.
I do have a quick Brady tidbit because I think it was either late last week or over the weekend. He was talking very highly about Russell Gage, and that it kind of got the fantasy Twitter sphere kind of swirling about Russell Gage and stuff like that. Has Tom Brady ever said a bad thing about a teammate? Especially a teammate on the offensive side that like he's going to have a good rapport with. Like if he came out and he was like, Russell Gage is the worst receiver I've ever thrown to, I'd be like, that's some fucking news. That's huge news.
I
But
don't like to take those kind of non sequiturs from quarterbacks. I mean, they have to say those sort of things. I will say Gage becomes maybe slightly more interesting at his draft cost as long as he doesn't move up too much, just because the herd's been thinned a little bit. So, if there is an injury to somebody higher in the pecking order than him, he might become interesting quicker without a Gronk there. But still, yeah, I think we're moving people too much just yet. Kind of have to see how things shake out closer to the year. And like we've talked about before, Godwin's health is going to be a big factor in that. So
sure.
we have quite a bit to roll into here with the Bills and Dolphins. Some strong opinions both ways here. So I want to make sure that we give ourselves plenty of time to hash these out. So we'll start with the Bills, current betting favorites for the Super Bowl. Good for Buffalo, by the way. They deserve a dynasty type team, which we could see maybe with Josh Allen being a young quarterback and this team kind of on the rise. But I mean, their offseason was good. They kind of just filled in some gaps that they had, like these good teams do. They really didn't have too much in the way of major roster additions to make. They signed Von Miller, maybe overpaid for him, but still, that's the type of thing you do.
That leadership on defense.
Yeah, no, like you said, when you're this close to a title, you gotta maybe even if you give out a contract that you might regret in 2 years, if you win a Super Bowl, it's not going to matter. So that's the kind of deal that these teams make. I like their offseason and I like the team. Do you have anything more to put in on the Bills as an NFL, like from an NFL standpoint, or can we just move into the fantasy?
No, I just think it's stupid that the NFL changed the coin flip rule after the Bills got screwed, but they did not do it after the Chiefs got screwed. So really dumb, NFL. See, you're picking favorites there, but no, I'm just kidding. I think the Bills are going to be great. I mean, they're easily, I think, the biggest threat to the Chiefs in the AFC. And I would honestly, at this point, like in the way I truly feel, the Chiefs are the biggest threat to the Bills. Like the Bills team's unbelievable. I just shed the Chiefs because they've been the
Sure,
for many years. But the Bills are a very, very good team, and I can't wait. I mean, the Mahomes Allen matchups for 8 to 10 years. I mean, the NFL would sign up for that any day. I mean, that's
of course. And I think that's more about the divisions they play in more so than the teams. I think the teams are pretty evenly matched, maybe a slight nod to the Bills just because they have some more playmakers on defense. But I think that the reason the Bills are a decent amount ahead of the Chiefs and when you look at like Super Bowl odds and things like that is just the division. And that's really where it stops because I think the Raiders would have an argument of being the second best team in the AFC East if they were inputted for any one of the teams. So I just think that the depth in the AFC West is the reason you see the Chiefs a little lower on those lists. But you're right. Bills, excellent team. We don't really need to go too much more over that. We kind of agree there. We can move into the fantasy side of this. Josh Allen, like we said, great quarterback. Quarterback one deserves to be, but a lot of the time, sharp drafters end up not acquiring these top quarterbacks just because people end up reaching for their guys in the second or third round. And I don't know. I mean, I could see myself with Josh Allen if he fell into the fourth, but I don't think that he's going to.
I don't think he will fall that far.
Neither one of us will really have many shares of him. You can go ahead with any Josh Allen bits you have, but I think that's kind of where we both stand.
Yeah, so when it comes to Josh Allen, he's unbelievable, both in the NFL and fantasy wise. I mean, he did have a couple of like random dud weeks, but I mean, anyone's going to. It's football. It's unpredictable to a certain degree. That's why you have, huge underdogs, win on a weekly basis that you just wouldn't expect. So there's chances where the Buffalo Bills just aren't firing on all cylinders and he has a bad week, but can't let that stop you from having Josh Allen. Yeah, I mean, if he fell to the fourth, then, you're kind of thinking about it with who's there, but there's so much depth that I feel like you can acquire at that point. I mean, and the gap in quarterbacks, I don't have the numbers. I may be way off by saying this, but I don't feel like the gap in quarterbacks is worth reaching this high, especially when you could get literally twice as far into the draft and still get someone like a Tom Brady or something like that. And was it the 8th round? You took Joe Burrow in our mock draft this week. So, and Joe Burrow is like a relatively highly rated fantasy quarterback right now.
Sure.
So I'm going to wait on him. He's unbelievable, incredible, one of the favorite guys to watch in the NFL. But if you take him, I think you're kind of a sucker in fantasy football.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think maybe in smaller leagues, 8-team, 10-team leagues where you're really trying to establish that positional advantage at the specialty positions, quarterback and tight end, I would consider Josh Allen if he fell a little bit. But most of our leagues are 10 or 12 teams. And yeah, there's just too much depth, like you said. So we're probably not going to end up with many shares of him in redraft. So we can move on to his number one target here, Stephon Diggs. He is one of my favorite guys. I have some interesting stats to lay out here in a second. I'll kind of let you get your bit in on Diggs, but I really like his value this year. He's currently at kind of the 1-2 turn in 12-team leagues, 13th overall, wide receiver 5 off the board. He would be my third guy off the board, and he would be the last guy in the first tier for me. So I would actually have him significantly ahead of Chase when we're talking about the first round, significantly ahead is 4 to 5 picks. So it just kind of depends on context there, but I really like Diggs a lot, probably a little bit more than industry.
So you said you'd take him over Jamar Chase?
Absolutely, yeah.
So is it just Jefferson and Kupp that you would have above him?
Correct.
Okay. That was going to be my question for you, is where he would kind of fall in that category. I can't really disagree with you about Diggs because he's an incredible player. I mean, shout out to the Bills front office for making that trade for him. I mean, that was a great trade all overall because the Vikings got Jefferson, but to bring in, a very established wide receiver to go with Josh Allen, I feel like helped Allen make that next jump. Fantasy wise, I like Stephon Diggs. I did have the option of taking Diggs, Devontae Adams, or Tyreek Hill in our mock draft. There was another wide receiver slipping my mind, but I ended up going with Tyreek Hill. I was a little burned by Stephon Diggs last year because he was consistent. He did not give you week winning games very often, if at all. But again, it's all about how you want to construct your team. If you get a RB1 with your first spot, and then you can grab Diggs as your wide receiver 1. I'm not going to argue with you about that. I'm probably going to take the upside of Hill over Diggs. And then Devontae Adams, I don't know. I'd think about it. Jamar Chase, I'd probably take Chase. So this is why I would take Chase, because you could get Joe Burrow later in the draft. You'd be able to stack them. So I'd probably have Chase above him, but I like where he's slotted. Wide receiver 5 is not a bad spot for him. Where he's getting drafted is good. He's going to be a good player. I just a little burned by him from last year, and I'm a little bit down on him. We know when it comes to that kind of group that he's in, but can't argue with you. I mean, he's such a good player, and he's so fun to watch. I mean, he's just always open. So
very technically capable, great route runner. I do have some stats that I kind of dug into here that I want to get into real quick, just to kind of illustrate my point here with Diggs. So this guy has seen almost the identical target share in back-to-back years. He's just over 160 both years. I believe it's 163 and 161. So very similar in that regard, both years here with Buffalo. He was wide receiver 3 in 2020. And then, like you said, last year, wide receiver 8. He was drafted, obviously, very high, probably about the same spot as he is now, maybe a little even higher. I think he was wide receiver 3 off the board. So that's kind of why you have the industry coming back to earth on him a little bit, because he was perceived as, like you said, very consistent, but didn't have those big week-winning weeks like he did the year before. And what we see here with him is that in his first year, he was looking at a 76% catch rate. And then in his second year, it was all the way down to 62.8. Now, you can say that has maybe because defenses were paying more attention to him, or maybe because him and Josh Allen just weren't connecting on however many throws that it were. It was kind of like the 15 to 20 yard routes were a little bit tough for them last year.
Yep.
And I think that that's something that might just be sample size. And if you are going to give this guy 160 targets, I don't really see how he fails in this Buffalo offense. And the red zone numbers, I like these a lot, actually. So in 2020, he saw 16 targets in the red zone, scored 5 touchdowns. That was good for a 19% target share. Last year, he saw 34 targets, almost double, which is good for a 28% target share. And he caught 10 touchdowns. All 10 of his touchdowns caught in the red zone. So what does that say? That says that those targets are a little bit more I think those touchdowns are a little bit more consistent than we'd see if maybe he'd caught 4 long bombs that he had taken into the end zone. So I think those type of plays are just a little bit more random when it comes to the NFL scope on a whole. So I think we'll see Diggs kind of come back to earth in a positive way there, where he had 0 touchdowns outside the red zone last year. I'd bet on the over on 1.5 from outside of 20 yards.
Yeah, for
And I think
sure.
those couple plays will lead to him having those big weeks that he missed out on last year. So I think that you kind of have the floor here with Diggs, which was last year at wide receiver 8. And I still think he has the potential to be the number 1 overall guy, just playing with one of the top 2 quarterbacks in the league and getting this many targets. He's just he's a great player, high ceiling, high floor. I really like him at the turn.
Yep, you did your job. You sold me a little bit on him there with your stats, so I appreciate that. I do actually have him in a keeper league. I'll be able to keep him for like a 6th round pick this year. So I mean, I'm not out on him. I'm still going to have my share of Stephon Diggs. I'm sure there's going to be plenty of weeks I'm thankful that I have him. I still think, okay, so I just had this thought while you were going through yours. And I've never thought about this when drafting a team or when, looking, I guess free agency is different when it comes to in season, but Stephon Diggs, or even this next guy who may have more of effect on like Gabriel Davis, they play in Buffalo. So 8 weeks of the year, they're in Buffalo, New York. Let's just say 4 of those are during cold, bad weather times, in New York's weather system. Do you ever think about that whenever you like, let's not go Stephon Diggs because he's at such a high caliber of player, but let's say with like Gabriel Davis versus a Brandon Cooks, like, Brandon Cooks in Houston in a dome, plays 8 weeks there. Obviously less quarterback. Cooks is the first, but like, I don't know. That would kind of make me think a little bit on some of those secondary options on a team that I've never really thought about before.
It is an interesting thing to consider. I would say that I really wouldn't worry about that too much with Josh Allen. I think that's kind of the difference maker there, is that we saw that one crazy game against the Patriots last year where it was just an absolute blizzard, but you kind of saw the tea leaves there and you were probably able to move off your Buffalo players. I think Josh Allen is the difference maker there. He's really just a different human being. He can sling the ball with probably the best arm strength in the league. So unless you're looking at, like I said before, like blizzard-like conditions, I don't really worry about him throwing the ball in Buffalo, even in 15-degree weather. I think they'll be just fine. I think if you want to worry about some Cleveland guys with Jacoby Brissett throwing the ball half of the year, having some wind in Cleveland, I could get behind you there, but I just don't really see an issue with Josh Allen in that situation most of the time, barring extreme circumstances. So that is something interesting to consider, though. I kind of like maybe using that as a tiebreaker and, later on in the draft when you're looking at your wide receiver 3 or so. So we can move on to Davis, as you said before. He's the kind of the number 2 guy in this offense now. He's a really interesting guy to look at. People are kind of all over the map on him. A lot of people have him as a big sleeper. I like Davis, the player. I just think that his ADP right now is a little rich. Wide receiver 28, 63 overall. So you're looking at him in the late 5th, early 6th. And I think there's just some more proven commodities there that are higher up on their team's totem pole that I would go for. But you can go ahead with Davis.
Yeah, I'm going to jump down to our kind of like second note here on Gabriel Davis because we have him. He's kind of booked around Courtland Sutton, Brandon Cooks, Darnell Mooney, and who's Davis?
Oh, that's that is Gabriel Davis. So I have
Sutton,
Brandon Cooks, Gabriel Davis, and Mooney.
Okay, I was like, wow, that's a name I haven't seen in a while. So. When
I like all 3 of those guys more.
Yes, thank you. So I like the other 3 guys more, mostly because they all 3 are potential wide receiver ones in their offense. Obviously, Cooks and Mooney, you could just slot them in, and then Sutton, you're a little bit questionable on. So if someone took him over Sutton, I would say you're kind of crazy, but you're calling your shot in the draft. But so I think he's going really high. You kind of sold me a little bit on Stephon Diggs now. So now I'm even lower on Gabriel Davis because I don't know. I don't feel comfortable drafting a second receiving option unless it's at tight end that early in a draft when other first options are still available. You do have Josh Allen. They're a relatively pass heavy team, so he should get his looks. But I mean, I would just take the consistency of Brandon Cooks or the potential upside of Darnell Mooney, both of them very easily over Gabriel Davis.
Yeah, I think we're both a little lower on industry on Davis. He's been kind of a hot commodity this offseason, rising up draft boards, I think in large part due to his playoff performance against the Chiefs, kind of a legendary 200-yard, 4-touchdown game. I mean, got to hand it to him. He's got the ability, but we're talking about a guy that has never had 600 yards in a year. We're
Right.
talking about a guy that's never had more than 63 targets in a year. So it's just a lot of projection with Davis. And I think when you're drafting that high, I'm going to look for a little bit more of a floor. So I don't mind the reach on Davis because he is a boomer bust guy, but I think we both stay away in a redraft. I think we can move on. I kind of want to move on here because I want to make sure we flush out the Dolphins.
Yep.
Singletary and James Cook, real quick thoughts. I am not too high on either one. I think they're going to kind of vulture each other. James Cook taking the passing downs role, Devin Singletary theoretically taking the rushing downs role. And this offense has never really been very RB centric.
Yep. I mean, there could be 5 or 6 touchdowns on the goal line that just get snagged by Josh Allen. And it might not even be designed runs. He may just roll out of the pocket in the red zone and then just barrel his way in for a touchdown, which just kills running backs. I mean, if I was, drafting and I could get Singletary at what I would consider a value, I wouldn't mind that just because of the, limited amount of running backs. And I would presume he's going into the season as an RB1. So I have a note here, like if you go 0 RB, through those first 3 or 4 rounds, I don't mind trying to grab Singletary and kind of riding him out. And then James Cook, I mean, I don't know. Like, I feel like he's just kind of a better version of Zach Moss, hopefully, but I don't know if he's really the guy that come in here and just demand, the full backfield. So,
yeah,
I lean Singletary just because I feel like they're going to give him the work. Also, with teams that are looking to win a Super Bowl, you don't have too many like rookies that just come in and make a massive impact on that team. Obviously, they would love James Cook if he could be a third down pass catcher for them, but that's kind of where I see his limit being. I mean, he's going to have to really come out and impress to kind of take Singletary's job. And I think Singletary is kind of solidified as their top running back option to start the season.
Yeah, I would agree. I think Cook's upside is a little capped just by his size and sort of his role coming into the league out of college. If I think with Cook, so I don't really see him becoming a feature guy. But yeah, he may have flex value, but again, I like to shoot for a little bit more upside there when I'm drafting with my third or fourth, running back. So do you have any more thoughts on the Bills here? Dawson Knox, maybe? I mean, not one of my favorite options at tight end. I think, again, he's going to be a clear third or fourth option. But I would rather wait and just take a guy late that has a good week 1 matchup and just start streaming from there. I'm not a huge fan. I think Knox is going to rise a little bit too high for me.
That's what I was going to ask you. I don't have his draft position here in front of me. I didn't notate where he went in our mock draft. But if he's not falling super far, I probably won't pick him up. I mean, I think of him highly enough to put him like kind of just below Dalton Schultz, Kyle Pitts. Like he has that really high potential upside because of Josh Allen. But I think the same thing you said, I would rather punt on tight end at that point, grab another high end wide receiver or running back to build that depth and snag tight end late. And that's all I got on Knox. I think he could be incredible. Like if you pick him up and he's unbelievable, like I wouldn't be surprised in the slightest.
Yep. So a real quick search here has Knox at tight end 10 on NFC ADP right now. Yeah, way too high for me. Not a fan of him drafting that high. Again, if he falls to like 14, 15, I'll take my shot on him just like I would any other streamable tight end. But I think drafting him as a starter is just a little too rich for my blood right now.
Yep.
So moving on to Miami, they made a lot of moves this offseason, obviously, made some additions along the O-line and traded for Tyreek Hill, gave up most of their draft capital to do so. I think their team's going to be better this year for it, but they might suffer down the road for giving such a bloated contract to a wide receiver. And it's just going to come down to Tua and if he develops.
Yeah, I mean, they did everything in this offseason to speed up the development of Tua. With that, I think that I think that they have a potential to have a good upside this year. You know, their over-unders at 9 and the overs at plus money and the unders at minus 125, which is kind of big for a year-long over-under. So Vegas is kind of telling you they don't really see this team making that big a step. I would say this team should be fighting for a playoff spot, you know, because they've been fighting for playoff spots the past couple of years despite pretty bad starts. But I don't know. I mean, new coach, you got Tua T as your quarterback who hasn't really proven much. You do add Tyreek Hill, which I've said I love Tyreek still. I mean, I think he's still going to be a top wide receiver in the league, but that contract, man, like I said it the day that it happened, and I still stick to it. Like I don't have any change in this. If the Chiefs would have gave him that contract, I would have been pissed. I mean, you are just man. And like when it comes to, you know, the Devontae Adams situation, like at least he knows Derek Carr. Like at least you're bringing him in for one, you just want to bring another good guy into that team because they're just a wreck in the first place. But like he knows your quarterback. Like they're not going to go out there on the field for the first time and have no chemistry. Like you gave everything for Tyreek, and him and Tua could just not be it together. I mean,
Sure.
so I'm more concerned about that. I think their team overall should be solid. I like Mike McDaniel. I think he's kind of a weirdo, but I think he kind of feeds into it, which I like. Like if you're an oddball, at least feed into it and just be that person, which he does. So I think he's going to be, I think he's going to be a solid coach. Not for that reason, for all the obvious offensive genius reasons.
Right.
So, man, it's so tough with this team because I want to go all in and say this team should absolutely take the next step. But with Tua T there at quarterback, I just don't know if I can put all my eggs in that basket. That's the biggest part for me.
Yeah, a lot of projection with Tua and a lot of moving parts. So it's tough to really tell what's going to happen here. With that being said, we can move into Hill and Waddle from a fantasy perspective here. I'll give my quick thoughts and then let you take the floor because you're more of the Hill fan on this podcast. I am pretty much out on him at wide receiver 8, 23rd overall on the NFC ADP right now. Again, like you said, it's just a lot of projection. Tua has really not shown the ability to put up anywhere near the stats to carry two wide receivers that are going in the top 13 right now. That really scares me. I think the floor is very low for a wide receiver going this high in drafts, and I don't see the same upside that you do. I think Tua is going to have to explode this year with the production that we've seen from him the past couple of years to really get both of these guys to where they are being drafted right now. And I think that's just a lot of projection. And I would much rather take guys that have established rapports with their quarterbacks, have better quarterbacks, and have clearer paths to consistent production.
Yep. No, I completely get where you're coming from. So I am higher on Tyreek. I think that he could easily be a top 5 wide receiver, no doubt. My biggest issue here is who in the world is taking Jalen Waddle as basically he's going to be the first ranked wide receiver 2 at where he's getting drafted at 13. Mm-hmm. That's insane. Like, I mean, that's like we made the Gabriel Davis argument and he's getting drafted in the 6th round-ish, 4th, 5th, 6th round. This dude's going to get taken in the 3rd round and he's the second option on a potentially bad team. Like that's where I just can't believe it. Like Tyreek has years of proving that he can do it before and with Mahomes, has a huge contract. Everything's leading to Tyreek just being that guy in Miami. And you got someone taking Jalen Waddle, you know, in the 3-4 turn. That's the part that blows my mind in that situation. I see it with Tyreek. I don't know how you think a wide receiver 2 on a team is going to provide wide receiver 2 upside in fantasy.
I don't know if he's necessarily the wide receiver 2, to be honest.
Okay, so that's what I was going to say. If you are taking him there, you are betting on him being the wide receiver 1 in that offense.
Yeah, 100%.
And I just think Tyreek got paid too much money. That owner down there's a little like he's not like, you know, the Chiefs or Broncos. I guess Broncos have new ownership where they'll just be like, okay, we overpaid him. Like, you know, do what we got to do to win. Like,
right.
He's a freak. He's going to want to make his money worth it. And I feel like they're going to feed him a lot. So Waddle,
I agree with what you're saying here from a contract perspective, but at the end of the day, Tua is the guy throwing the ball on the field, and
Right.
he has familiarity with Waddle. He threw him 140 balls last year, not all 140, but most of the 140 balls came from Tua last year. He played with him in college, and Waddle caught 104 passes last year for a reason. So I could see a world. I think it's much closer to 50-50 that Waddle leads this team in targets. And if that's the case, like you said, if they are really going to a pass first offense, which it seems like they are based on the investments they've made, I could see Waddle out targeting Hill and maybe in a PPR setting being a better value. You probably lean Hill in a non PPR situation just because you'd figure he has the bigger play upside. But yeah, I just don't really know what to expect here. That's kind of why I'm a little bit lower on both these guys.
Yep. I'm in on Tyreek. I'm out on Waddle at that draft price. I just think that the team they're gonna want to try and feed Tyreek the ball, but we're kind of short on time, so we can kind of run through this whole rest really fast. The whole backfield. If you can get Edmonds as a depth piece at running back late, I don't mind that. Again, you're not really betting on upside; you're kind of just betting on safety.
Yep.
But I don't mind it because Edmonds is a clear RB1 at this point on this team with Gaskin and not Gaskin. Oh, yes, Gaskin also.
Gaskin's still there.
And Michelle and I believe Mostert also. So the only one that concerns me is if Mostert can stay healthy because he's going to be familiar with the Shanahan style offense.
Yep.
I guess Gaskin was with McVay last year, not Gaskin, Michelle. Jeez. But yeah, I grab Edmonds as a depth piece. I wouldn't really plan on starting him on a week-to-week basis because I feel like that backfield could just have absolute dud weeks. And same thing for Mike Gesicki. I think he had 2 or 3 goose eggs last year. I would rather take my chances on, like I've always said, Robert Tonyan or someone at that level that, I feel like there's not going to be as many bust weeks with, let's say, like a Robert Tonyan as opposed to a Mike Gesicki. So I'm going to lean Tonyan.
Totally agree on Gesicki. He's a third option, best case scenario behind Waddle and Hill, and maybe some weeks could be 4th or 5th. So I just do see too much inconsistency there unless a few options get hurt in front of him. And then with the backfield, a big muddled mess right now. You are getting a discount on these guys in the draft because of it, but I'm probably staying away unless one of these guys falls really far and I can snag him as my RB4 or 5. I like Edmonds probably the most just because he got the investment out of all of them and has shown the ability to be a consistent fantasy contributor and is still in his prime. Michelle kind of on the upward side of his career. Gaskin really was inconsistent last year and hasn't shown the ability to be a feature back over the course of his career. And Mostert just hasn't stayed healthy. So I'd take my shot at Edmonds.
Yep, for sure. Well, again, everyone, like, comment, subscribe. Let's just throw all of our best bets at the end of the second episode. Obviously, this is part 1 of the AFC East. Part 2 will be out in a couple days. Take a look out for that. We're going over the Patriots as well as the Jets and our best bets for this division. Peace out, everyone.